Hi, my name is Beatrice and I'm a junior. And this is where I live. If you'd look where I live, you'd think my life is pretty much like yours. But if you really knew me, you know there's more to the story. I'm a first-generation immigrant from Brazil, and that means that life in my house can be crazy and chaotic and a little bit unconventional. And for example, we speak Portuguese at my house. So it's not always super easy for my parents to figure out school stuff when it's in a different language. And sometimes at parties and stuff, I feel a little bit out of place and like I don't fit in, and even a little bit marginalized. But one thing I've learned from being in an immigrant family is to just embrace my identity, even if it's not like everyone else's, and to be confident in exactly who God made me to be. Hey, I get it, every family has a story. But you can't really know me until you know what it's like where I live. This isn't just my home. It's part of my story, and it's personal.
You can know somebody and not really know them. And the same thing is true for you. You can hang out with people and still not have a ton of people who know the real you or who get you. For example, have you ever dealt with something or felt something and you simply decided to keep it to yourself because you didn't think that other people would understand? Or you did share it and you felt like the people you talked to about it were drawing a blank? For most of us, our friends are probably the people who get us the most. And some of you may say that you have a bestie who totally gets you. And that's awesome. But it's probably not a lot more people than that, is it? Here's a stat I made up, but I think it's true. The majority of people who don't feel like there's anyone who gets them is 100%. And this is totally normal, but sometimes it would be nice if more people understood us, all our quirks, interests, struggles, and fears. But instead, most of the time, we feel like nobody gets us. And you know who feels that way? Literally everybody. Almost everybody. The truth is nobody gets me or nobody knows the real me, and that feeling isn't easy. It's one of the reasons this idea of a personal relationship matters so much, because whether you knew this or not, you're actually wired to be known. You were made to have somebody who gets you and understands you and knows you, what you're really like. And this, my friends, brings us back to a guy named Zacchaeus. Last week, we started talking about this encounter Jesus had with a man named Zacchaeus. In the section of the Bible called the New Testament, there's an eyewitness account from people who actually knew Jesus personally. Those are called the Gospels. There are 4 of them, and they all come from different perspectives. They didn't all share the same stories. Sometimes they were writing about different people, which affected which details they included. And here's what I mean. The Gospel of Luke is the only gospel that tells the story of Zacchaeus, and there's a reason for that. Luke was writing to a mostly non-Jewish audience. The first followers of Jesus were Jewish, so they kind of figured that everyone who followed Jesus would have been Jewish. But that's not the way that Jesus operated. He was for anyone, from any background. So it was natural for the not Jewish people to feel like they didn't quite fit in. So in Luke's gospel, there are a lot of stories about people who didn't feel like they fit in. It's an easy way to imagine that these are people Luke wrote about because these are people Luke wrote to. He wanted his readers to see how Jesus treated people just like them. So Luke shares this story of Zacchaeus, who, like we learned last week, was on the outside of the group. He was a Jewish tax collector, which was a super bad thing to be back then. The short version, he was a sellout and a traitor. But then Jesus comes to town and everyone is dying to see him. By this point, Jesus was way famous and people wanted to know. Is he like the rumors say he is? Is he really healing people and performing miracles? Is he really challenging the powers in charge? Everyone wanted to see what Jesus was like, and Zacchaeus was no different. So he shows up. To get a better view of Jesus, Zacchaeus climbs a tree. He was short, so getting a higher view helped. But also, I imagine Zacchaeus wasn't sure how Jesus would feel about a guy like him, a guy who collected taxes for the Romans, and probably a little extra to keep for himself. Jesus looked out for the poor and the mistreated people, and nobody was better at mistreating them or making them poor than Zacchaeus was. So I imagine he wasn't looking to stand out. But then the craziest thing happened. Jesus looks up and calls him out and invites him over to Zacchaeus' house for dinner. Luke tells the story this way. We hear that and think, okay, that's a little bold. Cook me dinner. I'm coming over with no warning. But in the context of this culture, this was an honor to host somebody for dinner. Having someone in your home sent a message of friendship. So Zacchaeus wasn't sitting in the tree thinking that Jesus was rude for inviting himself over. He was most likely sitting in the tree thinking, I can't believe Jesus would want to have dinner with me at all. And he announced it loud enough for everyone in the crowd to hear. In fact, Luke writes this. So why did Jesus invite himself over? Because Jesus cared about what Zacchaeus cared about. And even though it didn't seem like it on the outside, Zacchaeus cared about belonging, being accepted, being seen, being known. And how do I know that? Because he was a human. And we all literally want that exact same thing. We want it more when we feel like we don't belong anywhere. Zacchaeus lived his life as an outsider. As a Jewish man, he didn't fit in with the Romans, even though he worked for them. He didn't fit in with his Jewish neighbors because he taxed them on behalf of the Roman government. So you can see Zacchaeus wasn't just climbing a tree to see Jesus. He was climbing a tree to see if he mattered to Jesus, to see if Jesus knew what mattered to him. And don't miss this. It surprises everybody. People don't expect a friendship to form between Jesus and the local outcast. They liked Jesus and wanted to be around him, and they didn't want to be around Zacchaeus. In fact, they all probably thought that they already knew everything they needed to know about Zacchaeus. As a tax collector, they knew exactly what he was like, and they didn't want to be associated with him. But not Jesus. Jesus knew that just because Zacchaeus had the label of tax collector didn't tell his whole story about who he was. It turns out Jesus knew Zacchaeus better than anyone around him did. Jesus understood that Zacchaeus was just a person who wanted to belong, and that Jesus went over to his place to show him that he did belong. If you ever wondered what Jesus thinks about you, the story of Zacchaeus hopefully is an encouragement to you. But maybe you've always felt like there were certain things that mattered to Jesus. For example, maybe you thought Jesus cared about your Bible reading and not your grades, praying but not your friendships, holy stuff but not real life stuff, your cussing but not your anxiety, your obedience but not your relationship with your dad, your sexual purity but not your dating relationship. Today I want you to know that things matter to you, matter to him. The things that interest you interest him. He doesn't just know that you love basketball or K-pop or theater. He gets why. He gets you personally. He understands why you like it. So think of it this way. I don't know about you, but that was not the image of Jesus I grew up with. That's not what I thought he was like. The personal Jesus surprised Zacchaeus and definitely shocked the people around Zacchaeus. And chances are, there are a lot of people around you every day who would never guess that Jesus is interested in them personally. That's why this week, I want to challenge you to try both of these ideas. Talk to Jesus about what matters to you. Jesus cares about what you care about. So start there. Pray about it. Share it with him. Let him know about the things that you like. Let him know about the things that you worry about. Tell him the things that bring you life and the things that drain you. Jesus is never bored hearing from you or about you because it's personal to him. Talk to others about what interests them. When it comes to Zacchaeus, it wasn't personal for the crowd he was in. They made assumptions about Zacchaeus, but they didn't really know him or get him. Jesus was the only one who knew what really mattered to Zacchaeus was a simple sense of belonging. It's possible there are people that you've made assumptions about too. People who you think are one way because of what you've believed about them. But you've never made it personal. Maybe this week you can make it personal by being intentional in discovering these things that others like. Let go of the ideas you've formed about them and do for someone what Jesus did for Zacchaeus. In this letter to the church of Philippi, the Apostle Paul writes about this very idea. Look out for the interests of others, which might mean you ask your friends questions and listen to their answers. You play something that your little brother loves to play. You go watch your friends play their sport even if you have no clue what's going on. You make an effort to include that kid who's a grade younger than you. You get to know someone for who they really are. From there, Paul goes on to talk about the character of Jesus and what Jesus was like. Paul said, make Jesus a model, because that's exactly what Jesus was like. He was selfless. He looked out for the interests of others. And we should do the same thing. This is what makes us stand out as people who follow him. Everybody needs someone to know their name and to know them personally. But I want you to think about something this week. Do you know what matters to the people you know? Like, really? Have you taken time to be personal enough and try to understand them? When we take the time to make it personal with others, we're living like Jesus. Jesus never satisfied by making a judgment about a person from far away. He got close up. He took time. He never let the label or an assumption inform his opinion. He cared about what mattered to others because they mattered to him. It's personal because Jesus knows what matters to you. Now you have the chance to go and do the same for others.